The night sky over the French countryside is a bruised violet, the stars smudged by a thin veil of cloud. In the distance, the silhouette of a modest farmhouse rises like a tired watchtower, its roof a patchwork of aged tiles. A sudden crack slices through the quiet, a sound like a brittle branch snapping under a heavy weight. The roof shudders, then catches fire, the flames licking the thatch with a hungry orange that spreads faster than the wind can push it. The heat rolls outward, a wave of dry heat that makes the air shimmer. You feel the heat on your skin, taste the faint metallic tang of ash in your mouth, hear the distant rustle of leaves as the fire devours everything in its path. 16 bodies lie among the charred beams, their lives ending in a blaze they themselves ignited. What force could drive a group of believers to such a final, desperate act? By the end, you'll see this tragedy was just the tip of the iceberg. The story of the solar temple begins long before that inferno, in the hazy glow of the 1980s when esoteric Christianity, astrology, and mysticism intertwined like vines around young hearts seeking purpose. Luke Jouret, a silver-tongued physician with an uncanny ability to draw in affluent seekers, stood on a small stage in a sunlit hall, his voice smooth as polished marble. He would often smile at his audience, his eyes briefly pausing on a woman who had just arrived with her teenage daughter, indicating a personal connection beyond cold rhetoric. Across the room, Joseph D. Mambro, always dressed in a replica Templar tunic that hissed against his skin as he moved, gestured with deliberate, almost ceremonial precision, his fingers brushing the worn leather of his sword-like belt. Their combined charisma offered a promise, a rebirth as the modern Knights Templar, a path to spiritual purification through strict asceticism and the pursuit of enlightenment. If you want to see where this goes, hit subscribe, because what comes next changes everything. Within 6 hours of their final ceremony, the farmhouse would be engulfed in flames. The cult's gatherings were more than sermons, they were performances. Members entered a dimly lit hall draped in deep crimson curtains, the scent of incense thick enough to coat their throats. Candles flickered, casting elongated shadows that danced across the faces of participants, each mask revealing a fragment of the ancient order they claimed to revive. The ceremonies unfolded with the slow rhythm of a heartbeat, participants chanting in unison, their voices rising and falling like a tide. The sound of a ceremonial gong resonated through the stone walls, reverberating in the chest of each listener, binding them to the moment. In these rituals, the line between devotion and spectacle blurred, and the sense of belonging grew stronger with each repeating chant. The following year, the group's reach stretched across Switzerland, France, and Canada, drawing from a pool of wealthier individuals who found comfort in the promise of deeper meaning. Yet, as the numbers swelled, so did the murmurs of unease. Families began to notice subtle changes, a loved one returning home later than usual, the faint scent of incense clinging to their clothes, letters that spoke of secret missions and divine duties. In the quiet suburbs of a Swiss town, a mother would receive a handwritten note from her son, the ink smudged as if written hastily, promising that the path is clear and that the sacrifice will awaken us all. October 4, 1994, saw a chilling scene unfold in a remote chalet nestled among the Swiss Alps. Snow fell in silent, powdery flakes that muted the world, while a thin line of candlelight flickered inside, casting long shadows across the low ceiling. The sound of a cracked window pane echoed as the cold wind whistled through the cracks, and the air smelled faintly of pine and iron. Inside, 5 members lay motionless on the wooden floor, their faces pale against the dark rug. One of them, Jean-Claude, a former accountant with a habit of polishing his shoes until they shone, had a single bullet wound to the chest, the blood pooling like a dark lake around his still hands. The other bodies bore signs of struggle, a bruised temple, a rope wrapped tightly around a wrist. The scene was later described by investigators as a tableau of controlled terror, each detail pointing to a meticulous orchestration rather than a spontaneous act. The investigation that followed peeled back layers of deception. Detectives uncovered a pattern of coercion that stretched back years, members who had questioned the doctrine found themselves locked in rooms bathed in dim light, the only sound the ticking of an old clock, their sleep interrupted by sudden bursts of chanting that left them disoriented. Financial records revealed that contributions from followers were funneled into offshore accounts, the money disappearing into ventures that the leaders claimed were investment in the future of the order. Through these findings, the magnitude of manipulation became painfully clear. Central to this manipulation were the techniques the leaders employed. In private meetings, Mambro would stare at a member for several minutes, his breath shallow, the scent of his leather coat filling the room, while Jouret whispered verses that seemed to echo from ancient cathedrals. They would deny basic human needs, meals were postponed until the next spiritual awakening, sleep was broken by sudden, forceful chanting, and emotional bonds were strained by assigning members to test their faith through acts that blurred morality. Members described feeling as though their will had been stripped away, leaving a hollow vessel that only the leaders could fill. When the full extent of the group's activities emerged, the scale of cruelty was staggering. The leaders, once seen as the custodians of a higher purpose, had become architects of an engineered demise. Families of the victims, kept in the dark for years, finally learned that the letters they had received were crafted by members under duress, the reassuring words a thin veneer over a reality of abuse. One mother recalled a night when her daughter called, voice trembling, saying, "Everything is fine, they're preparing us for the next level," not knowing that the next level was a prelude to destruction. The most unsettling revelation comes from an affidavit filed months after the fire. A forensic report uncovered that the ashes of the farmhouse contained an unusually high concentration of a slow-burning accelerant, a substance typically used in industrial welding. This detail suggests that the fire was not simply an act of collective suicide but a calculated execution, designed to mask the true nature of the deaths. The presence of that accelerant reframes the entire tragedy, turning a story of misguided devotion into a meticulously planned murder. Reflecting on the solar temple's narrative forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature. Two possible explanations stand out. One sees the leaders as master manipulators, exploiting the vulnerable yearning for belonging and meaning. The other perceives the ideology itself as a twisted beacon, convincing its followers that extreme sacrifice was the only gateway to enlightenment. In reality, the cult's downfall arose from an entanglement of both, charismatic exploitation wrapped in a doctrine so potent it could justify the most horrific acts. The families left behind carry the weight of unanswered questions. Some still receive anonymous letters, the paper crinkling under their fingertips, the ink smudged as if written hurriedly in the dead of night, promising that the work continues. Others find themselves haunted by the silence of a missing child's laughter, a sound that once filled a kitchen now replaced by the hollow echo of an empty house. These lingering shadows illustrate how the impact of manipulation can stretch far beyond the immediate victims, infecting those who never entered the inner circle. As societies, we must learn to recognize the subtle signs that precede such catastrophes. Sudden changes in behavior, secretive meetings, unexplained wealth, and the isolation of members from their broader support networks are all warning lights. Education, open dialogue, and community connection can serve as buffers, preventing the allure of a cult's promise from taking root. The story of the Solar Temple does not end with the smoldering ruins of that farmhouse. It lives on in the unanswered questions that echo through the lives of the survivors, the unsettling forensic details that still surface, and the lingering sense that such a tragedy could happen again. The final, unsettling fact that the fire was accelerated by a deliberate chemical agent forces us to ask, what other dark designs have been hidden behind the veil of faith, waiting to be uncovered? What will you do when the next flicker of false enlightenment appears on the horizon?